And guess what? John Bolton is, as much as he upsets people and from the memories of the Iraq War and all of those things and pulls back all those old memories, John Bolton has been a fixture of the American foreign policy establishment for 3 decades.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting today when his name came up and this whole thing was announced that I looked up to one cable outlet and they were running a ticker that said that the president's getting rid of HR McMaster and has chosen a Fox News analyst to be the new national security director, apparently forgetting that he's an ambassador.
He didn't pick Geraldo. He picked Ambassador John.
He was an undersecretary.
And he didn't. That cookie duster didn't get gray all at once. He's been working at this for a long time.
By the way, mention of the House. I like how you always work in bacon.
I like to work bacon.
Save him from himself in the Russian investigation.
All right, Senator Rand Paul. He has been publicly documenting his efforts to read the 2,000-plus page, $1.3 trillion spending bill, along with the concerns he's finding along the way. Just check out his Twitter feed. Well, the bill reportedly funds Planned Parenthood, sanctuary cities, increases the EPA's budget, but it caps the number of ICE agents and shortchanges the border. Can Senator Rand Paul do to stop it?
They can roll over me. I'm in the minority. There'll be about 10 Republicans vote, maybe 15 Republicans vote no on this in the Senate, maybe a handful of Democrats. But they will win. The majority will win. But it's Republicans and Democrats joining hands together to blow a hole in the debt.
All right, our senior Capitol Hill producer, Chad Pergram, who knows everything that's happening
we'll see,
as they're burning the midnight oil there. He joins us live from outside Senator Paul's office. Okay, Chad, is he back to reading the bill? He was here on Tucker, but he still has a long way to go. What's he doing? Is he still looking through page by page?
Of course.
He stopped at about page 600, Shannon, and just a couple of moments ago, Senator Paul left his office. He walked over to the Senate floor. That's because they're having a vote right now to ask the Sergeant-at-Arms to request senators to report to the floor. That is a big signal. That tells us that they think they might be able to get a vote on this omnibus bill tonight. And you might ask why Senator Paul is standing in the way. You know, he argued about this 2,200-page bill. You might remember in February, he basically shut down the government for 5 or 6 hours because they just got a 700-page bill just a couple of hours before they were asked to vote on it. He said nobody had read it then. 700 pages, well, that's almost a haiku compared to the 2,200-page bill they got last night. And 2,200 pages, think about the size of something written by Tolstoy. If you put together Anna Karenina and you put together War and Peace, you would still be about 100 pages short. And that's why Senator Paul was so upset. He was criticized in February, particularly by the Republican senator from North Carolina, Tom Tillis, who said, you know, you're just stopping our process here, making the government shut down to make a point. And that's precisely what Senator Paul said. Yes, I am trying to make a point. The debt's too big. Nobody's read the bill. And that's the point he was making as well tonight. Now, there was another connection to forging ahead with this bill earlier, Shannon. Jim Risch, Republican senator from Idaho, he threw a monkey wrench into the system here. I'm told in just the past few minutes the objection is over a provision in the piece of legislation of naming a wilderness area over after Cecil Andrus. He is the former Interior Secretary under President Carter and also the governor of Idaho. But they think they have resolved this, and we expect to vote sometime later tonight if they can get everybody on board, Shannon.
I wonder if War and Peace or this bill is more interesting. Can't say I've read the bill, so we'll see. Chad, thank you as always.
Have you read War and Peace?
Yeah, but it's been a long time. And I remember it took quite a while, so I don't think I would have gotten it done in 2 days, just like we're expecting these lawmakers to do with this bill. Chad, thank you very much. All right, the former FBI director back in front of a microphone this evening. You're going to hear what James Comey had to say. We will convene tonight's panel to discuss. And the city of Sacramento on edge right now as graphic body cam footage is released in the police shooting of an unarmed black man. There are protests sweeping California's capital tonight. The story is breaking. We will take you there live. Plus, one of the lawyers in the eye of the Stormy Daniels saga, Michael Cohen's attorney, he's going to drop in a little bit later, so stay tuned. Rising quickly in Sacramento, California after a police shooting. Protesters blocking traffic and
neighborhood.
Yeah, it says going down the street, breaking windows of cars. He busted both my truck windows out, and he busted in the people's backyard right now, across the street from my place.
Sacramento police officers arrived on scene a few minutes later, but initially didn't find the suspect. 10 minutes after police arrived, a sheriff's helicopter with night scope video spotted a man in a backyard and alerted police on the ground to his location. They told officers the man had picked up a toolbar and broken a window out of a home. Body cam video then shows the officers running up a dark driveway with flashlights. When they spot the suspect, there is 5 seconds from the time they tell him to show his hands to the sound of gunshots. A warning, the video is graphic.
Show me your hands! Gun! Oh. 5-7 shots fired. Subject down.
Even after the man is down, the officers still believe he's armed and continue to take cover near the side of the home. Sacramento police later say the officers saw the man extend his arms holding what appeared to be a gun. It turned out to be a cell phone. The helicopter video also captured the shooting, with deputies notifying dispatch that shots had been fired. Meantime, back on the ground, the officers involved in the shooting decided at some point to mute the audio of their body cams. Unclear why they turned off the sound, and so far police have not addressed it, but experts say because of the darkness, the body cams provide very little visual evidence, noting that in poor light anything can be perceived as a gun, but in all they fired 20 shots. Stephon Clark's family has now hired famed civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who represented the families of both Trayvon Martin, who was shot by George Zimmerman, and Michael Brown, shot by police in Ferguson, Missouri. The police involved in this shooting are on leave. So far, they have not been identified. Shannon.
Crump and I went to law school together. I'll have to check in with him. Trace, thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte making good on a threat to subpoena the DOJ tonight. The Virginia Republican wants documents related to the conduct of former FBI Director James Comey and his number 2, Andrew McCabe, who oversaw the Clinton email investigation. Brand new tonight, video of Comey speaking at Howard University right here in D.C. Was he talking about the president when he said this?
But you're never going to change hearts and minds on Twitter. You're only going to be able to do that by getting up close and showing people who you are. You can't show people who you are through Twitter. We get caught up in watching the battle back and forth on Twitter, and that distracts us from what really matters.
Let's talk about it with tonight's panel. David Catanese is a senior politics writer for U.S. News and World Report. Bree Payton is a staff writer for The Federalist, and Fox News contributor Steve Hayes is editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Welcome to all of you. Steve, how excited are you about Comey's new book?
I'm interested to see what he says. I'm interested to see what argument he makes. I'm more interested to see how he answers questions when he sits before journalists who might bring some skepticism to what he's selling.
Yeah, and he's going to talk with our own Bret Baier to sit down with him, and I'm sure Bret will have a lot of probing questions for him when that happens. In the meantime there, Bree, do you think he was talking about the president? He never said his name, but all of the back and forth on Twitter, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's clear there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. I think if we were to collect all of James Comey's emo tweets, we could print a Russian novel. And I think that, you know, what we're seeing here is just time and time again having standards for other people and then different standards for himself. And that's exactly what we're seeing. He's saying you can't sway hearts and minds, yada, yada, yet he himself, you know, obviously thinks differently when he talks on Twitter.
Yeah, David, he is pretty active on Twitter. Very cryptic sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think he's right about this. I mean, look, I think we could all probably use less time on Twitter.
Yes, I agree.
But it's the nature of the beast. We all use it. We use it to get news. It's how I wake up in the morning to start my day, to figure out what's going on. The president uses it. I think it's fair to criticize the substance of anyone's tweets, what they're saying. But the sort of the vehicle of Twitter, I think, has opened up and sort of democratize news in a way. And I think overall, that's a good thing. And Comey uses it himself, as you guys say.
Yeah, he does.
So, you know, I think it's fair to criticize the president's tweets and Comey's tweets, what they're saying. But the medium is overall, I think, democratize and sort of level the playing field.
Well, and something that Comey may have to discuss after, you know, Bob Goodlatte, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, gets his hands on some of these documents that he says that he couldn't, he's tried, but they have to do with the Hillary Clinton email investigation. He says this in a letter to the DOJ: 4 months have passed since I wrote you seeking documents related to our ongoing investigation regarding charging decisions in the investigation surrounding former Secretary Clinton's private email server, 2016. Given the department's ongoing delays in producing these documents, I'm left with no choice but to issue the enclosed subpoena to compel production of these documents. I mean, Steve, this sets up this interesting tension now between GOP lawmakers and the current leaders of the DOJ and FBI.
It does, but I think the Republican lawmakers have a point here. I mean, they're charged with conducting oversight. They asked for these documents. They've made clear what they're seeking from the documents, and we haven't had much cooperation. We have some limited cooperation from DOJ thus far, but a lot more documents that need to be turned over. If the Department of Justice, if we want to avoid a second special counsel, which you've had some Republicans call for, the DOJ should be forthcoming with the documents, regardless of who's asking.
And the DOJ says this: the Department of Justice and the FBI take the committee's inquiry seriously and are committed to accommodating its oversight request in a manner consistent with the department's law enforcement and national security responsibilities. They wrap it up saying the department looks forward to completing its response in as timely a manner as possible and will continue to work towards that goal. Bree, so they say the documents in some shape or form are coming.
Yeah, I mean, how often have you heard that from a government department when you file the FOIA requests and know what they really mean by that, right? You know that they really mean that this is going to take a while to get to you. We don't know if that's intentional or if that's not intentional. I definitely think that subpoenaing them after requesting this months ago is definitely fair. I think it's clear we do need to get to the bottom of what happened, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen now.
All right, David, I want to make sure I get this into and get your comment on the new omnibus bill. Jennifer Rubin writing in the Washington Post saying, for someone who has the majorities in both houses of Congress, this negotiation reflects a shocking level of ineptitude on the president's part. You wonder when he will start winning.
Well, look, Congress completely ignored the president's budget blueprint for sort of austerity as he put forward. But that sort of is standard in Washington.
I mean,
Congress always
ignores
Obama. The same thing happened with President Obama. And look, this was a grand compromise where the Democrats got some more domestic spending in exchange for military spending on the Republican side. And that's why I think it will ultimately, you know, pass. You're going to always have, you know, you've got the Rand Pauls out there with the big stack of the documents saying, you know, this is the problem of both administrations. But I think that's sort of a Groundhog Day event, too. You're always going to have those outliers. In the end, this is a compromise, and they completely ignored the president's budget.
Yes, they did, especially when it came to that wall. Okay, panel, please come back. Will you stick around for a few minutes?
Sure thing.
All right, thank you. All right, in Texas, the bombing terror is over. The suspect is dead, but the investigation into how and why he terrorized an entire community continues at his home outside Austin. And mass killings with no apparent motive, the most frustrating kind of crime to understand. We have motivated the suspect who built a series of package bombs and terrorized the Austin area for weeks. One key piece of evidence, that 25-minute cell phone video the suspect left behind. And there are other clues as well. Casey Siegel joins us live with the very latest tonight from Texas. Hello, Casey.
Shannon, good evening. Tonight, the barricades are down, and we are getting our first up-close look at where the Austin serial bomber lived. Right back here in this modest home in Pflugerville, Texas, north of Austin. He lived here with two roommates who have now both been released from police custody following intense questioning and interrogation by authorities. Austin police saying this evening their names are being withheld because they are not under arrest. FBI and ATF agents, meantime, packed up the final evidence they've collected from Mark Condit's home, part of which they say included a trove of bomb-making materials and computer hard drives, which could hold more clues to help answer the question why. However, that 25-minute video recording found on Condit's cell phone has helped some. Investigators characterize it as a confession, saying Condit details all 7 bombs he made and speaks repeatedly of his challenges in life. The 23-year-old also reportedly refers to himself as a psychopath and says he wishes he was sorry but wasn't, adding he felt, quote, disturbed since childhood. Now, authorities say Condit made the video not long before blowing himself up as cops rushed his vehicle, as he referenced how they thought they were closing in on him after he was captured on surveillance tape dropping off packages at that Austin FedEx store. This as the chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, Michael McCall, said today that the suspect had a hit list, now in police possession, but detailed names and addresses of potential future targets. McCall went on to say that Condit had also been traced buying, quote, exotic batteries online from Asia. And he has also been traced to purchasing nails and other hardware used in his bombs at a local Home Depot store not far from here. All troubling details as we continue to learn more about this suspect. Shannon.
Casey Stugel live for us in Texas. Thank you, Casey. Well, nearly 6 months after the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history, the motive of Las Vegas killer Stephen Paddock remains a mystery. But new surveillance video released by Mandalay Bay shows the gunman in the days leading up to the massacre buying snacks, gambling alone, and also this, transporting an arsenal of weapons and ammunition into the hotel via a series of suitcases. The shooter killed 58 people, firing from his hotel room on an outdoor concert October 1st of last year. Well, 2 nights ago, this program, Stormy Daniels' lawyer made the case for the adult film performer to be allowed to break her non-disclosure agreement with the president's personal attorney. Up next, we'll get the other side of that story from Michael Cohen's lawyer. David Schwartz joins us. Plus, of, quote, thuggish behavior. As we're hearing, CBS is still vetting this and deciding whether or not to run the interview with the adult film performer. So joining me now is David Schwartz. He's the attorney and friend of Michael Cohen. Now, Cohen's the one who drafted the non-disclosure deal that's now being challenged. David, great to have you with us tonight.
Hi, Shannon.
All right, let's start with Mr. Avenatti was on with us Tuesday night. I know you guys have sparred in and out of court, so let's play a little bit of what he had to say. We'll get your reaction.
She didn't get the binding release in the agreement. Mr. Cohen could not bind Mr. Trump under the agreement. This is going to be thrown out. There was no agreement.
Right. You know, I'm thinking back to my years of law school and the bar exam and practice and all that kind of thing. I mean, people who aren't parties to the agreements can benefit from them, correct?
It's called the third-party beneficiary rule. Of course, you know, these are fictional arguments that Mr. Avenatti is making. Clearly, the agreement was between EC LLC and you know, the person was EC, the entity was EC LLC. So clearly there was an agreement, there was consideration, there was money passed, and she received the $130,000. It's an agreement, and the courts tend to side with creating an agreement, and they look at the intent of the parties. So I think it's pretty clear.
Okay, so I went through a lot of this agreement with him the other night. Of course, you know, their argument is because President Trump did not sign it, that they're not bound by it. Okay, so let's walk through some of this. In paragraph 8.6 of this the non-disclosure agreement, it says, this agreement, when signed by all parties, is a valid and binding agreement enforceable in accordance with its terms. Then at the end of the contract, it says this, in witness whereof, by their signatures below, the parties each have approved and executed this agreement. Now, there are 3 lines there for signatures. One of them would have been for the president. He did not sign it. So how do you fight that argument in court?
Very easily, because in the beginning of the agreement, you have an and or. So it was either EC LLC or DD. So
people know that's the entity that Michael Cohen created to handle this deal, is that EC LLC.
Right. That's the entity. It's a separate entity. So it's and or. Now, Mr. Avenatti was trying to make a whole to-do of the and or, and it was in the conjunctive, and the parties should have been reversed. He's finding every technical argument possible. None of them are going to fly. And then he starts mentioning California law, as if there's something mysterious about California law, that they define the and or the or differently than we do in New York. Well, I looked at the California law, and the California law is very clear that it's either or. It's defined as either or. So either EC LLC could have entered into, DD could have entered into it, or both of them could have entered into it. And you ask why? Why was there a line at the end? Because Michael Cohen wanted to have the opportunity, if he wanted to show it to Donald Trump. If he wanted to show the agreement to him, he had the opportunity to do so, which also answers the question, he didn't show it to him.
Yeah, that's my question. When did the president know about this?
He did not know about it at the time. He found out about it much later on, when we all found out about it.
Okay, so who first violated this non-disclosure agreement? Because you know her team says it was Michael Cohen, not them.
No, absolutely not. So what happened was, Michael Cohen there was a subpoena from the Federal Election Commission, which Michael Cohen had to answer. All right, so he had to answer that complaint. So clearly, in the agreement, when you answer, that's provided for in the agreement. He had to answer for it. There were leaks from the federal, lo and behold,
somewhere.
There were leaks
Somewhere.
from the Federal Election Commission. However, the agreement clearly, even in a situation like that, Stormy is still bound by the terms of the agreement. It doesn't give her the right to start to say, oh, Michael Cohen violated the agreement, so now I could freely speak.
Well,
that's not the way the agreement works.
Well, the agreement was filled with language about breaches to the tune of $1 million each.
Right.
I know that the documents you have in federal court say you think that she's gone at least into $20 million into this. You know she doesn't have $20 million, so what's the point?
Oh, because the whole point is Mr. Avenatti has basically told her that she's going to make a fortune off this case. She's going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars. Well, the problem is Michael Cohen will not rest until he collects every single penny of that money. So although she doesn't have the money now, there's certainly future earnings, and there's a disgorgement clause in the contract as well.
Okay,
so he will
let me ask you really
disgorge every
quickly.
single penny.
Okay, let me ask you really quickly because we got to go. What's the next court date on this? Do you have any kind of proceeding for discovery or anything else in the federal court?
Yeah, just to make it very clear, I am Michael Cohen's attorney in his defamation case against BuzzFeed. So he has other attorneys handling
the
this
rest
case.
of this. Okay.
So I'm not sure when the next court.
Count Wall Street Journal columnist Daniel Henninger among them. The Mueller investigation says this should be shut down. He writes, before all of official Washington descends into total systemic madness. And then there's Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, a Democrat.
Half the academic world has been opposed to special counsel. Half the judiciary has been opposed to special counsel.
So your position is there should never be a special counsel ever for any case?
Almost never.
All right, let's bring back our panel tonight to discuss this. Now, it's interesting, in the piece in Wall Street Journal, Henninger also talks about the fact that there are two problems here. He says all this hysteria has made top-level FBI officials lose their professional discipline. He also says that the president has to stop talking about all of his constant admiration for Putin. David?
Well, sure, but, I mean, the president is the one picking at this and making it a distraction. He could sort of put it to the side, not respond to the daily news cycle that is obsessed with the Russia story, and focus on his agenda. But he wants to fight it. And I think if he were to fire Mueller, it would be the one thing that he could do where it would cause Republicans to revolt. Lindsey Graham, who is an ally with him, earlier this week said it would be an impeachable offense. So I think that is sort of the red line. I mean, he gets away with a lot of stuff that goes against Republican orthodoxy. You know, they give him a lot of room, wiggle room on Capitol Hill. I don't think he has wiggle room on this. And I think he makes it worse for himself when he fights Mueller every day on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, Bree, is he to blame for keeping this feud going?
No, I don't think so. Every single day when we wake up, we turn on the news. It's all about Mueller, what Mueller's doing, the Mueller probe, these little tidbits that seem like they're coordinated leaks in certain specific outlets. As we know, McCabe is a notorious leaker. And now we're just hearing about, the supposed probe that he launched just before he was fired into Jeff Sessions, and all of this dramatic brouhaha. So I don't think that Donald Trump is really to blame here in this. And I don't blame him for pushing back and saying, when is this going to end? Where's the red line? When are you going to keep this within what you're supposed to be keeping this to, or are you just going to go willy-nilly wild?
Well, and to the point, we understand that the Attorney General's own attorney says that he's not currently under investigation. What we're told is that a year or so ago, it was that McCabe was looking into this criminal investigation for possible perjury. And here's what ABC News said. According to sources, McCabe authorized the criminal inquiry after a top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Patrick Leahy from Vermont, and then Senator Al Franken wrote a letter in March 2017 to the FBI urging agents to investigate.
Yeah, I mean, look, it may have been the case that that's what started the investigation, triggered the investigation, but I don't think that was necessary. I mean, there was public debate about what Jeff Sessions had testified to on January 10th, and then also what he had said in response to a letter to Senator Leahy on January 17th. Just to pick up on David's point just briefly, I think the indications are that President Trump wants to fight this more aggressively now. I mean, if you look at the hiring of Joe DeGeneva, Victoria Tensing,
John Dowd leaving, do you think that was part of the
John Dowd leaving, I think that was part of the challenge. And I would argue that John Bolton, the addition of John Bolton, even though he's National Security Advisor, wouldn't necessarily have anything directly to do with this. His instinct, I think, is as a fighter, and we all know that the president doesn't limit his questioning or seeking advice to people who are in certain subject areas. If you're in front of him, he's going to ask your advice about whatever is on his mind.
Yeah, and today he was asked pointedly, as he was on the way out of the room, do you still want to talk to Mueller? He was asked a couple of times, and he said, I would like to. And David, I mean, a lot of people speculate, is that why Dowd left? Because there's been a lot of speculation. If I was his attorney, I would say, no, you're not going to do that, at least not willingly.
Right. The attorneys tell him, no, that's not a good idea. We should negotiate the terms, and then he decides and goes out on his own. It doesn't matter really what attorney that Donald Trump brings in. I mean, he might bring in more like-minded people. Dowd might not have been on the same page, but it doesn't matter because this is the freelance president. He decides to do what he wants. But I still don't think the best thing that could happen for Donald Trump is for him to be exonerated by this. And for him to continue to pour flames on it makes people suspect that there is something wrong, that he did do something wrong. So I think that in fighting it with fire, I think undercuts him because Mueller does have the respect of both parties. And there have been indictments and there have been misstatements. The Attorney General of the United States appeared to lie before Congress about his contacts with Russia. He said there was no contacts. That's why Senator Franken asked for an investigation. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, under oath, said he did not have contacts with Russia when it was documented that he did.
In the context of the campaign.
No, they asked specifically during the transition. Al Franken did follow up and ask specifically during the transition. Jeff Sessions said no, and it is clear from the reporting that he did have contacts with the Russian ambassador. So there are misstatements. I think the more the president tries to deflect from this, I think it's